We continue learning Kitzur Yomi. We're in the middle of Siman Lamed Hey, the halachos of challah. Says the Kitzur Sivches, Mitzvahs Afrashas Challah Sheyachal Isha Balas Habayis. Mitzvah itself belongs to the woman. Why? This is one of the special woman's mitzvahs. We'll explain. Not right now, but basically because Chava, Adam and Chava was called the Challah of the world, and she received this mitzvah. That's one reason, or because of the Aveira. But either way, a woman gets this mitzvah. Let's say she's not there. The dough will spoil. Someone else is able to separate the challah, but again, it has to, of course, be a yid. Shachash levesh challah ber Shabbos, b'chutz laaretz eichlin b'Shabbos. Let it eat the challah on Shabbos. And what do? Don't eat the whole dough. Leave over a little bit. Leave over a little bit of challah Motzei Shabbos, and leave a little bit of challah. And on Motzei Shabbos, you're going to take away from that piece. You'll take off a piece of challah. And the piece has to be large enough that you can take challah from it, and some will still remain chulin to be inan, because we need the remainder to be recognizable. Which is mamish this year. You got a serious problem. And one has to be careful to remember about a Afrashas Challah. And again, we'll give out the disclaimer. Anyone that would like, please feel free to reach out, and we'll try to send a copy of the book that we wrote on Challah and Halakas Neiris. We go to Siman Lamed Vav, the halachas of salting Kitzur with a beautiful akdam over here. It says any blood that comes from the meat that is shechted, animal, poultry, is not allowed to be eaten. So what we do is a process called melicha. We salt the meat, and then which brings out all the blood, and then we can eat the meat. Says the Kitzur kodin shamolchanis abasar. Before one actually salts the meat, you have to rinse it well with water. Approximately a half hour. You need the water covers the entire piece of meat. If you see dam on the actual flesh, you gotta rub it under the water. You gotta rub it while it's being soaked to remove the bavachim. And similarly, when it comes to birds, it's not a din only in meat. The same thing is by birds. Chickens. Inside, you see a little bit of coagulated blood due to a wound. Then you got to remove this area before the soaking. When the water is very cold, put the water in a little bit warm in order to remove the chill before soaking the meat. Key. Because of the coldness in the water, it's going to make the meat hard, and it's going to prevent the salt from coming out. So you want the water to be at the very least room temperature before soaking the fresh shechted chicken or meat. The meat sat in water for 24 hours. Everything is aser. Why? Because after 24 hours, the dam that's inside the meat, the blood comes out, and that blood is treif. If a liver sits for 24 hours, liver is a little bit more complicated. Where Shabbos you don't have any time. Or stam time is of the essence. You don't have to let it sit for half hour. Rather, you can scrub it underwater. Let it soak a little bit. As long as there's no red tinge in the water, then you're allowed to begin salting the meat. After you soak it, you cut the meat into two. You have to rinse the place that you cut it, because the dam that's there. Again, this is the step before the salting process. Meat that became frozen due to the cold. You have to make sure that it's thawed before salting. Like, don't put it by an oven. Sometimes you let it soak in warm water to thaw out the meat. The meat that is designated for soaking the meat in the don't use it for anything else, because worry that there might be blood in there, and therefore you don't want to use that vessel. After the meat is soaked, one has to allow the water to drip off before salting. Because so the salt does not become dissolved by the water. And the salt will not dissolve, it cannot extract the blood. Excuse me, not to embarrass. You have to be careful. The meat does not get fully dry. Why? Because then the salt's going to fall right off it. So the meat has to be wet, but not soaking, that the salt will become dissolved, then it will not go into the meat. The salt should not be very fine. This, of course, is going to be the salt for melicha, the salting salt. This is the kosher salt in cane. It's going to dissolve immediately. And also shouldn't be very big. It's going to fall off. Medium size salt. So the salt that comes when the water is cooked, it should also be dry, that it will spread. You have to spread out the salt on the flesh, all sides. Every moment on every ounce of this meat and chicken has to be full of salt. The chicken, you have to open it up. You want every part of both sides to be fully covered with salt. And we conclude with Sivyot. Habasar b'milchai sarich laniach. You have to cover the salt and meat adam lazim enu so that the blood can drain out. Lachain. One should not put the basket with the meat on the ground, because then the blood cannot flow out. Even after it's soaked for a half hour, before it was rinsed the second time, always keep in a place that the blood could flow off more and more. When you salt it on a board, the board should be angled and inclined so that the blood drains off. You don't want to have a groove in the board that the tzir can gather. If you're salting eifais or the side of an animal, it has an interior, it has a receptacle. You got to flip it upside down. The hollow side is going down. So that the blood can flow off. And we'll pick it up from Sifyat Aleph and Mirza Hashem.